Alright guys, what's up? So, as you can see, we got the car running. Fired right up. It's really easy to install the Holley system, and I'll go through what I did real quick. So I started off with the Holley Terminator X-Max drive-by-wire 4L80E, or electronic control transmission. And I went with the part number 550-926, which is the LS1 injectors with the drive-by-wire throttle body, and then the 4L80E control as well. So kind of a mess of wires in here as I just hooked it up to just to get it running. Get a flashlight here. I didn't cut any of the wires yet. I just put pigtails on the end of the wires and connected where I needed to, just so I could hear the car run. So I gotta organize all these wires, and there's a lot of them with the drive-by-wire. It adds some wiring, and so I just got wires everywhere. So I got the battery box installed, and the main and the ground wire installed. I went with that's 0 gauge wire. I ran the 0 gauge wire underneath the car. The Holley main power wire is right here. That I ran inside, or I will be running it inside the car. As of right now, I just have it looped back here just so we could get it to the battery. There's some other wires for the Holley that is going to have to be ran inside the car as well. So there are a lot of wires. There's a couple extra wires with the drive-by-wire. It's not bad. You got to tie into a couple things with the brake light switch and other couple wires. Not terrible. Just take one at a time and everything will be fine. As for installing the wiring harness, it went really easy. The instructions. There's tons of videos out there on YouTube for these instructions, but they're nice. They're in color. Basically, the main thing that everybody says to do with these instructions that installs this Holley is to do it step by step, and it's laid out really simple. Shows, this is all in color. It shows every one of the connectors, where it goes, what it's for, ones that you may need or don't need. When I installed it, we just went one by one, and the hardest part for installing it for my application was getting to the grounds on the back of the heads. It's really tight back here, especially on the driver's side here with the windshield wiper motor in the way. So I had to take a little bit of a fuel system apart, fuel lines apart, to get that side back there, because I painted the heads on this. The heads, I painted it, and I didn't clean the back side. There's one of them right now, right there. I didn't clean the back side, which, knowing this, next time or in the future for anybody watching this, clean the back sides of the head before you install it, because I used the highest bolt hole that you could go through or go to is the one that I ended up using. That the ground strap on the back of the wiring harness that's supposed to go there is not very long, so you don't have a lot of options to go to the other side, to the other back side of the head. It has to kind of go to that one. So clean the back side of that. It'll make life a little bit easier, unless you got lots of room back there. But I only have about, I don't know, this side's about 1.5 inches of clearance, and that side, it was just, it's about the same but a little less, because with the bump out of the washer motors, so I'm sorry, of the wiper motor. So but other than that, fairly simple. Everything just plugs right in. I got my 2.5 bar map sensor from GM. You do have to use a pigtail in order to hook that up, because that's like a, I believe that's like a LS3 style or LS2 or LS3 style map sensor, and the one that comes with the Holley is for, let's see here, yeah. So that one would plug into a factory like an LS1 style map sensor. This is just a stock truck 1 bar. That I might get a 3 bar yet. I don't know. This is a 2.5 bar, which would bring me to about 21, 22 psi to read safely. But I like this one because it's a GM one, and I know like a lot of 3 bar ones are out there, the Chinese knockoff ones that fit in here. So I might just have a, I don't know what I want to do yet. If 20 psi or 22 psi isn't enough to get to my desired horsepower, then maybe I'll switch to a 3 bar, but I'll do a little more research and see if that's going to be enough. But yeah, other than that, everything just plugs right in. The LS1 injectors plugged in pretty easily. As you saw in the video, the startup was great. It fired up. I didn't even have to crank it. I did rotate the key on and off a bunch of times to get my fuel pressure, since it was a brand new system, there was no fuel in it yet. So I turned the key on and off a bunch of times in order to cycle fuel through. And of course, you had some leaks. I always feel like every time I start up a new system, you're always going to find a couple leaks. So as we were doing it, Dad and I were watching for leaks, and we found 2 at the flex sensor that I forgot to tighten. I'll admit it, no big deal. Tightened them up, it went away. Nothing leaked at the tank. And then I had, in the video, the startup video, you can see that we were looking things over, and then all of a sudden there was a bunch of fuel running out the back side of the bell housing. After I investigated it, there's a plug underneath these fuel rails. I don't know if it's I don't know exactly. It's a pretty big hole. Probably about the size of a quarter that has a rubber grommet on it, and I don't know if it's like I don't know what the hole's actually for, but the grommet, the rubber O-ring got pinched when it got tightened, so it was spilling fuel out everywhere. And when I was priming the fuel system, I didn't notice that it was leaking out there, because what was happening was the little bit of fuel that was leaking out of there was filling up in the galley, or in the oil, or in the valley cover, and it took a while for it to fill all them holes up in there. And then once it got to a certain level, then it started to run out and run down, and that's why I didn't catch the leak right away. So it was kind of a tricky one, but no fires, no nothing like that, so that's good. So after I got that all squared away, I fired it back up and let it warmed up to like 180 degrees, and it idled good, sounded good. So now I got to start putting all the wires away. So I have a 2-inch hole coming, or 2-inch grommet. I pop a 2-inch hole in here somewhere. I'm gonna put the heater cord back in, and because right now I just have the wires going through here, through the hole for the heater cord. So I gotta figure out where exactly I'm gonna put this actual harness through the firewall, and put that rubber grommet through it, and so it protects it. And for the transmission side of it too, I gotta figure out how to get that through the floor, because I think it's going to be kind of hard. I don't know what people do. I'll have to do some research, but I might just pop a hole through the floor and then come up somewhere in this region or something, possibly. I don't know yet, because I don't think there's enough. I don't think the wiring harness is long enough to loop forward and come up and around. I don't know yet. It's just my preliminary guess, but it might just be easier to pop a hole through the floor somewhere and come up, because I might end up mounting this Terminator X-Max underneath the seat. I don't know. That's what I got to figure out in the next couple weeks. That's what I'm going to be working on now that I know that the motor fires and runs and sounds good. I don't know. It was a $200 Craigslist 4.8 liter that I got off of Craigslist. So supposedly it has 120,000 miles on it, which I did take everything apart on the motor. I took the pistons out and I gapped the rings, and I looked at the bearings. The bearings looked fine, but then again, I didn't like mic them out or anything. But put it all back together, torqued everything, and it fired and it sounded really good. So, and it ran and it sounded really good. So, knowing that this motor is good, now I don't have to worry about pulling everything back apart to whatever, get a new motor or rebuild this one or whatever. So, pretty excited about that. Because I did take the pistons and rings out to gap them for boost, and like I mentioned before, the who I bought it from off of Craigslist said it had 120,000 miles on it. So when I gapped the rings were pretty tight yet, actually. One I think was even at, I got a picture of it somewhere. One was even at like 17,000 gap, and then some of them, most of them were at like 20. One was at like 17 or 18, and another one was at like 22 or 23. So pretty tight compared to a friend of mine took his all apart, and his claimed to have like 150 to 160 or 70,000 on it, and his rings were all at 25,000s or bigger. So just my guess is that, that this motor, the guy was telling me the truth and how many miles were on it just by how tight the gaps were. And I'm glad that I did that, because I gapped them all to, I think, 22 or 23. I'll have to look back on my notes on what I wrote it down and what I did. So, but yeah, so I'm happy that everything is starting to come together. The motor runs, the turbo spins, the belt didn't come flying off when it was running, the grounds were good. I still have to wire in the alternator. When I did fire it, I forgot to hook up this alternator wire, so it was running off a battery. And I was kind of curious I was looking at the Holley, and the voltage on it was like 11.7, 11.8, 11.9, and I'm like, well, that doesn't seem right. So it dawned on me that I didn't hook up this harness that is I bought off of Sloppy Mechanics. It's an alternator plug, and it's a flex fuel all in one. So this blue wire comes off the one pin of the alternator, and then these 3 wires go to the flex fuel sensor, which I put underneath the like the driver's feet, or underneath the floorboard there. So this is supposed to go to the power tap in the Holley system, Holley harness. So, which is this right here. It had a connector on it that was like a shield protector, kind of like this one. This is your input outputs. This is where all the input and the outputs go, the 4 inputs and the 4 outputs. So this is the power tap harness, and Sloppy Mechanics made a harness so that the alternator and the flex fuel would go through all this, and you use one input to wire in the input for the sensor, for the computer to read the sensor and adjust their fuel timings and all that good stuff automatically through the flex fuel system. So I have to get this plug, or the plug underneath the motor, plugged into here. So I think I'm gonna have to, I got it all wire loomed right now, which I didn't realize. I didn't know how all this worked before I wired all the fuel system up. Before I got the Holley, I just got the Holley in on Friday, so 2 days ago, and we installed it, and I didn't realize that this had to go all the way inside of there. So I think this blue wire is very long. I got it like doubled and tripled in here, looped back and forth. So my plan is to unpin this one if I can. I don't see why not. I'll have to look at that. I'll have to unpin it and then wire it through the firewall inside and try to make it work. Otherwise, I'm going to have to extend this, which I don't want to do, but we'll see. I'll have to play around with it and see what I come up with. But other than that, everything hooks up. Everything's labeled on this. Now, these 3 wires, well, this one's for the fuel pressure, which I'm going to get a sensor that goes directly in here. It would be the same sensor for my dome pressure reading, which is right here. So this same exact, it's a 0 to 100 psi transducer sensor from Low Dollar Motorsports, which those things are like 30 bucks, and they work really well compared to the Holley ones, which are like, I don't know, 100 bucks or something, or 100, or even more than 100. They're probably pretty close to the same sensor too, but so one of these is for the fuel pressure that goes into there. I gotta get one of those yet. But then these 2 are extras, because these are for the TPS and idle air control. You don't use these with the drive-by-wire system, because the drive-by-wire system is kind of, they send you a standalone harness. That harness is not built into the regular harness. So this one, the drive-by-wire, connects to the throttle body, and then it connects to the gas pedal, and then there's an extra slot right into the computer where it plugs into. And then you got to tap into one more wire, which is for the brake switch. It wants to know when you're on the brake. I don't know if it's a safety thing. I haven't looked into it far enough, but it says something about when you're on the brakes that the throttle plate won't open more than 10%, but I don't know if you can tune that out, or I don't know. It might be just a safety feature that you have to play around with. So right now I just have these tucked away into there, but I'm going to make this look a little bit all nicer, as, like I said, we kind of just threw it together to get it hooked up, fire the car, which it fired right away, which is really exciting, and go from there. So I got to hook up my MAC valve yet. I got to run the exhaust for the wastegate down in there, hook up the dome pressure to this MAC valve, hook up some more vacuum lines, route the wiring, and then hopefully you can take it on the block and see what it's like to drive this thing. This is almost a 3-year build. Going in July, it'll be 3 years that I bought the car as a roller, and never driven the car ever. So I have no idea what it's like to drive this car. So that would be pretty neat to go around the block in it after all the hard work. I got to hook up the fans yet. I got the fans and the relays and all that stuff ran. I just got to run an output to a ground to trigger so that the computer can trigger the relays for the fan to turn on. See how that all goes. Yeah, other than that Holley system, it was plug and play. I mean, it followed the directions. I mean, there's a lot of people on the internet that seem like they're having problems, and I understand that some of the sometimes the harnesses, the wire pins get messed up from factory or from when they're building them and everything, but a lot of people say just follow the directions, and we followed the directions. Everything is colored and labeled, and it's, I did have to, I installed the O2 sensor. I had to take that off, weld it up. It shows you a nice picture on how to do it, and how to do it, where to put it, where to place it, the angle of it. Pretty simple. I can't be more happier that hooking this up and firing it up and going through the wizard. The wizard, there was, it shows how to go through the wizard in here. There was a couple things that, I'm not a tuner by no means, so there was only a couple, it's all pretty self-explanatory, except for when you get up to, if this was a naturally aspirated, and I didn't have a turbo on it, there's probably a lot less pictures to go through, or a lot less steps on the wizard you have to go through. there were some things after you get to the turbo side of it that it asked for the map sensor, which I had the GM map sensor, so that made it easy because it's right there. I didn't have to calibrate one. So I've never done that before, so that's why I went with the 2.5 bar, just so it was all plug and play for now. Then this wide open throttle ignition timing, I didn't quite understand that. It says if a turbo or supercharger was chosen, use the slider bar to set desired wide open throttle ignition timing at 0 boost. So I have no idea. I set it at 20 from what Sloppy Mechanics did when he started his up. So I'm gonna have to research that and get that, if that's okay or whatever. But I know that I'm not even gonna be going wide open throttle anytime soon anyway. So I believe just going around the block and everything like that will be fine anyways. And then there's just a couple other things. The wide open throttle, the target air fuel ratio, yeah, you want to keep that under 12, I know that, but then again, this is another wide open throttle thing that I'm not going to be doing for a while. So there's a couple screens that I could see how it could confuse some people, but there's also enough information out there that would get you through and get you started up that that makes it easy. So you just enter your tire diameter, rear end ratio, the transmission right here, and then it makes a tune and it uploads it automatically, and then all you gotta do is do the throttle position sensor wizard part of it, which is simple. There's just another wizard you click and it just says to push the gas pedal twice down. I did get a little bit confused. What happened, I was reading right here, it said this is for drive-by-wire, because when you have a cable throttle body, the TPS, or the throttle position sensor, should read 0. Well, on my screen it read like 15% that it was open, and you know, kind of scratched my head a little bit like, okay, should it be at 0? Because this is saying 0. But from my research, and I asked the Holley group, which was really easy on Facebook, I asked the Holley group and a bunch of people commented that the drive-by-wire is going to keep it open a little bit because there's no idle air control like in a drive-by cable. So it's supposed to be a little bit open, 15%, give or take some, so that it can start. Because I was playing around with the throttle body, and if you close it all the way, then there's no air that's going to be able to get in. It doesn't have any way to get in, so it has to have some airflow to get in there to start it, of course. So that's why it was reading at 15% or 17. It was like 17 to 14%, and people's numbers that commented on my post were between like 13 to 19% that some people, and then the computer automatically adjusts. So that was the only question that I really had that was not what the instructions said here. So, but after that, it fired, turned the key and it fired right up, no cranking, no nothing, and it just went. But yeah, so there's some other things that I got to read through here to make sure that I'm doing after startup and all those things. And then it says the self-tuning thing, and drive it around, let it learn, and go from there, I guess. So just wanted to give you guys a little update on the Project Nova here. So this is where I'm at, and my future videos, I didn't really record any videos doing a lot of things, so I think what I'm gonna do is go through each one of the systems, like the fuel system, the turbocharged system, the exhaust, and how I did the intercooler and stuff like that, and kind of build the car backwards through videos and show what I did and give tips and tricks on things instead of actually doing them and videoing them as I did it. Sometimes I was just work, and then I didn't get a chance to grab the video camera, or I got a little bit of video and whatever. So I think I'm going to reverse the process. So maybe help somebody else out or give some people some ideas. But other than that, I'm very happy, and I highly recommend getting the Holley system. And you don't need the drive-by-wire. You don't need the, or you could go with like a TH400 or an older transmission, so that you could save a little money by not getting the drive-by-wire or the electronically controlled transmission. But I wanted to go with the 4L80E because it's a little. I wanted overdrive for one because the TH400 is a 3-speed, so 4L80 has overdrive, and it's a little, strong, nice transmission. So I went with that, and then ended up going with the drive-by-wire because I had a problem. I was concerned about getting the cable through the firewall. I didn't like the gas pedal I had. And instead of buying a whole new gas pedal, I ended up, I could have bought a nice low-car gas pedal. And, that was enough money. That was a lot of money for just the gas pedal. And then I wouldn't have been able to use the gas pedal how that low car is designed to work with a carbureted engine anyways. So I decided to eject on the cable throttle body and go drive-by-wire, which made it a lot easier. I had to make, this is a GM Performance gas pedal, and I had to make my own tabs and my own braces and brackets, whatever, which wasn't bad. It took me a few hours. Once you come up, the hard part is getting the gas pedal the correct way and the correct height, and kind of just holding it and guessing and making tabs and whatever. So that was the hard part. But then I didn't have to worry about the cable going through the firewall and having it snake back through. And the headers are right there, even though I have them wrapped. I didn't like how close everything would have been with the fuel lines right there. And I know I could have made it work, but it just seemed like more of a headache, and sometimes just spending the extra money in the long run will help. So, I had the cable coming through here and S-ing around to come back through here, and then the cable, I had one that was too long, and then I had one that was way too short, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. So I just thought that the drive-by-wire would be easier and simpler, and it was. And I got a used LS3 throttle body, and I had to get a couple adapters. Now, I don't prefer, there's nothing wrong with this intake. It makes power. It's not the nicest looking. It's just a truck intake. So this is a 3-bolt throttle body, and this, of course, is a 4-bolt throttle body. So one day I'll upgrade this and I'll get rid of that. I know the Gen 4 ones are, you can find them for reasonably priced on Craigslist or Facebook, whatever, but nothing around here locally. There really isn't good junkyards for me to go find one. So I'm just going to run this for now. There's nothing wrong with it, but then I had to buy some adapter plates, which this adapter plate changed it from 3-bolt to 4-bolt, and then I installed it. This is from ICT Billet. I installed the throttle body on here, and the throttle plate, when it would open, it would just catch, which I don't, this is a 92 millimeter or 90 millimeter, 92 millimeter throttle body. The cable one I had on there, it's a stock truck one. That one's a lot smaller. I don't know. I think it's like 80 or something. I don't know exactly how big it is, but it would just hit. So I had to get this spacer that ICT made, that they make, and then it shims it out so that the throttle plate don't hit. So I had to jump through a couple of hoops to get that, and the money I spent on here, I guess I could have put towards an intake and whatever, but I already had my fuel rails all hooked up, and I just went that option for now. But in the future, I'll probably upgrade that. But for now, it's going to be fine, and it runs, and it works. I don't have any more fuel leaks. You know, I had a couple fittings that were loose, but everything's together, so we're going to run it, and it'll be fun, it'll be fine. So I can always upgrade. Cars never 100% done anyways, so it's always, you always want to be upgrading things later and stuff like that. So, but other than that, the other thing that was interesting was when I filled the transmission. This is just a cheap, not low car. I believe these are low car knockoffs. Transmission and oil dipstick. This is, you know, I got a 4L80 transmission, and when you buy this, it says it's for a TH400. But it fits and it pops right in, and it was super simple to install, and it doesn't leak. And well, it doesn't leak right now, but I filled this up. I can't remember exactly how many quarts I put in, but I overfilled it. I don't want to say I overfilled it, but if you look it up, it's like 11 or 12 quarts or something like that it takes. So I put in like 10, but because the torque converter wasn't getting filled and the transmission cooler wasn't getting filled and all that stuff, the pan, you know, it got full in the pan and it just kept going. And then it started to leak out of the electrical connector. Actually, you can go check it out right now. So it started to leak. Oh, way too far over. Yeah, it started to leak right out of that electrical connector. It just, not a lot, because I filled it, and it took a couple days for it to actually show that it was leaking, because it ran down in the center, it came out, and it went all the way forward. It started to go around the front of the pan, and then eventually dripped down, and I had a decent sized puddle right there, and I was like, oh great, what's leaking? And after I figured it out, it was leaking right out of those electrical connectors. And I think what was happening was the fluid level was just so high, and it was putting pressure, a lot of, you know, or the fluid was seeping past, you know, normally the oil should only be so high in the pan, it shouldn't, I don't think it goes above here. So since the fluid was sitting so high, it was just wicking out of those electrical connectors. And ever since I started the car, it hasn't leaked now. It's been 24 hours, but now it's dry. There's no, you know, there's nothing leaking out of there. So that's good, because I thought maybe that was bad, or I've read, you know, you read something on the internet and all of a sudden yeah, that's what's happening with you, but then it's just something stupid, which it was just the fluid was just too high. So I'm glad that that's not cracked, or the O-ring isn't bad or anything like that, which I've read on the internet, which happens in these or something. Of course, everything happens, but but other than that, now I don't have any other leaks on the ground or nothing, so that's good. No oil leak, it looks like, no fuel leaks. So yeah, because this was leaking on me with these fittings right here. I forgot to tighten these, but you're always gonna forget to tighten something. You go through so many things, and the transmission lines aren't leaking here in my tranny cooling, so that's good. I got that all hooked up, so that should automatically turn on and off when the transmission gets hot enough, but haven't gotten to that point yet. So a lot of new things you gotta check over and starting these cars up, building it from nothing basically. But yeah, so that's where I'm at with the project right now, and we're gonna get these wires squared away and hopefully take it from around the block here shortly, a couple weeks or something. So alright, thanks for watching.